I'm a former U.S. visa officer, and today we're going to talk about the top questions you will be asked at your U.S. visa interview. So keep watching if you want to prepare for success. My name is Mandy, and as a former visa officer with the U.S. Department of State, I interviewed over 100,000 visa applicants over the course of 7 years, and these are some of the most common questions I used to ask day in and day out. And I remember thinking as a visa officer how often people seemed really unprepared for my questions. They seemed not to understand what I was asking. There would be pauses and delays. And unfortunately, if you're not prepared, that increases your chances of being denied at your visa interview. So you definitely want to understand the most common questions that are likely to come up. Now, generally, questions will be different depending on what type of visa you're applying for. For today's video, we're going to talk about the most common questions that are likely to come up for any type of temporary non-immigrant visa, like a student visa or a tourist visa. So that way you can better understand the process and gain insights as to why the visa officer is asking these questions. So the first question that is likely to come up is, why are you going to the US? Now, this is actually the most important question of the entire interview. And the visa officer is asking this question to understand your purpose of travel and whether or not they believe that it's a legitimate reason for you to go to the United States. So how you answer this question is really important. Your first answer in the interview will also set the tone for the entire interview. And this is why you want to know that this question is coming and how can you convey to the visa officer what you plan to do in the United States. The second question that is likely to come up is, do you have any family in the US? Now, your answer to this question will help the officer determine how strong your ties are to the US and versus your ties to your home country. You have to be honest in this question, and just because you have family in the US doesn't mean you won't qualify for the visa. It is just one factor that they take into account. However, if you lie or you're dishonest with this question, they most likely will be able to find out, and you can be denied your visa, or even worse, earn yourself a permanent lifetime ban to the United States. So you better watch out for this question. Being honest is so important in this process. And proper preparation for this question, if you have family in the US, is extremely important. Question number 3 is, how long will you be there? Now, it's important to give a direct and honest answer to the visa officer about how long you plan to stay in the United States. Sometimes Customs and Border Patrol officers at the port of entry when you enter the country will actually check in their systems how long you told the visa officer at the time of getting your visa stamp that you plan to stay. And they will check to compare it maybe to your luggage that you're bringing, just to see if you're being honest. Additionally, at a future visa interview, it's also possible that the consular officer may also double check to see if you truly stayed the amount of time that you said you would at your last interview and in your DS-160. So you definitely don't want to drastically change your trip plans after your interview. That will make them question your credibility and whether or not they can trust you at a future interview. Question number 4 is, what do you do for work? The visa officer asks this question to better understand your employment situation at home and whether or not it could be considered a strong tie to your home country. So as you can imagine, having been at a job for a long time, probably better than only having a short amount of time at your job. But again, it's very important to be honest. Question number 5 is, have you ever been denied a visa before? Now, this is a little bit of a trick question because the visa officer actually already knows whether or not you've been denied a visa before. It is in their computer systems because every single time you go in for a visa interview, there is a record of it in the system. There are notes that the visa officer takes about the interview. And so there's really no hiding it if you've been denied a visa before. Sometimes they ask you this question just to kind of test whether or not you will be honest with them. And I can't tell you the number of times when I was a visa officer when people used to lie at this question. I knew that they had been denied, and I would say, oh, have you ever been denied before? And they would say, nope, never had a visa interview before. And so if you do lie to the visa officer, just know that there can be some pretty severe consequences, including, obviously a visa denial in that moment, but also sometimes a permanent ineligibility or a lifetime ban to the United States for lying to the visa officer, because they have evidence at their fingertips that you are not being honest. Okay, so this is why honesty is so important in the visa interview process. Now, I know I gave numbers to each of these questions, but just know that these questions can come up in any order, and sometimes the visa officer may only ask you 1 or 2 questions. Sometimes they'll go a little bit deeper and ask you 3 or 4, but these are some of the most common types of questions that are likely to come up at your visa interview. So you definitely want to do a little bit of practice and make sure that you know how to answer these top questions. If you like this video, please hit subscribe, give us a like or a comment, and also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thank you so much for sharing our content with others who would benefit from our expert advice as former visa officers, and we hope that you will be successful on your U.S. visa journey.